What's going on, everybody? This is Cody, the home theater hobbyist. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of you out there that are like me. You've got an older AV receiver, stereo amplifier, or just a piece of AV gear that you like to use and listen to music and stuff like that. But the problem is, since it's older, it doesn't have support for some of the latest formats like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Spotify Connect maybe, Apple AirPlay, those types of things. You just don't have it. And so it's kind of a bummer because you've got this perfectly good equipment that you've got to figure out what you're going to do. Are you going to buy a new piece of equipment for $500, $1,000, $2,000? Or are you going to go used and kind of deal with that? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. Or you could buy what I have right here. This is the Arylic S50 Pro Plus. And the cool thing about this is it's small. As you can see, it fits in the palm of my hands. But what is this? This is a wireless multi-room stereo preamplifier. And what that means is that you take this little box, you plug it into an amplifier like this AV receiver, and it plugs into speakers, and you can begin listening to your music in high res because this has Bluetooth 5.0 built in with aptX-HD support, and it supports up to 24-bit 192 kilohertz files, FLAC, ALAC, AAC, WMA. It's got MP3 support built in. And it's also got a lot of the major streaming services, including Spotify, Amazon Music, Tidal, Qobuz, and many others. So all of a sudden you can bring new life to your older gear. And the good news is you don't have to break the bank to do it, because as I record this, this costs $219. But check the link in the description below and you can find out what the latest price is. So definitely do that. Now, before I get too far in this video, I should mention one thing that's very important. Arylic sent this to me for review and they said that I can keep it. So this little box is now mine. So I want to thank Arylic for sending this, but that doesn't change anything about my review process whatsoever. I'm still going to tell you what I like and dislike about this little box. And there are a few things that I wish were a little bit better. So I will talk about that, but I wanted to be clear about the status of this particular box. Now let's move on and talk about how it works. So like I said earlier, the S50 Pro Plus is a relatively small box. I mean, it literally fits in the palm of your hand, but I like the overall design, and then this nice metal chassis that's in silver, and then it's got this black front face up front. I think it looks good and will match with most components. Now the front face is set up in what I think of as 3 different zones. Over here, you've got a little LED indicator that indicates the status. So right now it's red because the box is powered off. In the center, it's got a little OLED display, which gives you information like track title, the volume status, because it does have a little bit of a volume to it for preamp. Now personally, I leave the volume at max, that way I can really control it the way I want with my amplifier, but you can do what you want there. And it also lets you know the input selection as well on the screen. Now over here is a little IR sensor for the remote, because it does have an included remote, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then around back, I do have this plugged in just so I can kind of show you a few different things. But around back, it does have these 2 antennas, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And this again gives you better signal range and stuff like that. And you can kind of flip it around and do stuff like that just to kind of get it where you want it, right? But over here, you've got your inputs like RCA inputs. There's a digital input. And then right here is a sub out connection, because you can connect a dedicated subwoofer to this. And over here are all of your major outputs from the device. RCA, coax, and there's also a digital output. And this means that this can be connected not only to legacy components, but the latest and greatest powered speakers. I tried this with the KEF LSX wireless 2s, which I have in for review. And if you're waiting for that review, it is coming. And if you're not waiting for that review, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you'll be alerted when it's published. But I did try this with those speakers and it works fine. So you can use this with not only, legacy components, but powered speakers, anything that can accept connections like these. Now down here under here is a little USB port, so you can connect a hard drive to it with music and stuff like that. I tried it, it works. And then over here is something I want to talk about. They've got a 12-volt trigger output, and with a 12-volt trigger cable, you can use this. When you power this on, it will automatically power on an amplifier if you use that cable with your amplifier or whatever you're using, and also turn it off once you turn this off. So that's a nice little feature. And then down here, it's got a little button that says reset, but it's really a multi-function button. If you double press it quick, quick, it will reset the device. But if you just give it a single press like that, it turns the device on. And then once it's on, you can actually cycle through the inputs like that with this button on the back. So not only does it reset the device, but it's really a multi-function button. And speaking of buttons, let's talk about the remote. I have it here. This is a nice remote. I like it. It feels good in the hand, and it is plastic, and it has all the basic features that you need for this device as far as input selection, mute. You can also dim the display with this, and it's also got these buttons down here, which are presets, because inside the app that I'm going to talk about in a minute, you can set up preset playlist and just different stations that you want to use, whether it be internet, radio, whatever. So you can just push one of these buttons and it will begin playing your favorite playlist or favorite station. And that brings me to the app, the 4Stream app. This is the app that you're going to use that controls basically everything about this device. You can download it from the Google Play Store or Apple App Store. But as you can see, I've got my device up here. And if I had more than one for a multi-room setup, I assume they would be further down this list. And you can go through with the browse feature at the bottom, log into the different services that you want to use, like iHeartRadio, Tidal, Spotify, Qobuz, whatever. You can log into them and play directly from the app onto this device. There's also a preset list, like I mentioned earlier, so you can connect there and, just set up whatever presets you want. Inside the device settings, you can go in, you can rename the device, you can see the IP address, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, along with set things like an alarm clock so you can wake up by it. There's also a sleep timer, so you can automatically just, go to sleep and turn your music off when you want to. There's EQ settings and a way to add those presets to the list. And that brings me back to the IP address. You can use that IP address to access the web player. Now, the web player is a basic web player in that you can play, pause music, you can skip forward, skip back to different tracks, and you can select the different inputs, and you can also do a little bit of the EQ there in the web player. But again, the app is more fully functional. That's what you're going to use to actually set up your playlist and things like that. So if there was one thing I wish the web player had, is I wish it was feature parity with the app. So you could actually go in, log into a service, create playlists, and just see them. But it does work. And so if you're away from the remote, away from your phone, but you're on the computer, you can play your music and you can also select presets. So that's pretty cool. And that brings me to my two main issues with the app specifically. First of all, I don't think it's very intuitive to use. When I first opened it up, I kind of had to poke around in it a little bit to sort of figure out what it was doing and how to kind of set up playlists and stuff like that. So I wish it was a bit more intuitive. The second issue I have is the setup process in general, and specifically the setup on a Wi-Fi network. When I initially set this up, I plugged it in hardwired and it found it easily on the same network. But once I tried to set it up on a Wi-Fi network, it takes a lot of steps to kind of get there, and I actually had to go to the help section of the Arylic website to sort of figure out what I was supposed to do. So I just wish that process was a little bit easier, and hopefully Arylic can work on that in a future version. Now, once it's all set up and you understand the app and the remote and the web player, it all works flawlessly. There's no hesitation, or the latency is small. I shouldn't say there's no hesitation. There's small latency there when you're setting up playlists and stuff like that, but it does work. So to test this preamp, I logged into my Qobuz account in the 4Stream app and I began playing music. I also tried some ALAC and FLAC files that I have downloaded legally on this thumb drive and just kind of listened to different things. I connected it to this AV receiver along with some speakers, and I also connected to this pair of KEF LSX2 speakers. This is a pair of powered desktop class speakers, and I like them. But anyways, I tried both and just sat down and began listening to music. And what I found was the overall presentation is nice, clean, and detailed. There's just an extra little bit of, I would say, push or detail in that treble regime, so it sounds just a touch bright. But the good news is you can actually reduce that treble. I listened to them on flat, and I'm talking about when everything was flat, but you can reduce that treble just a touch if you want to. So that's good because the remote does work. I found that the mid-range is nice and smooth, and that bass is nice, detailed, crisp, and punchy when it needs to be. Overall, the soundstage is nice, and there's just a touch of liveliness to it, especially when listening to live concerts. There's good channel separation left to right, and things are accurately placed in the soundstage where you want them to be. There's nice depth to the image and also height, which creates a nice immersive experience. So I don't have any complaints about the sound quality from this preamp. Now, there are a couple of things that I wish this had. The first thing is Dolby and DTS format support, because when this is plugged into a television via the optical connection, it just doesn't support it, so you don't get any sound. But speaking of a television, I wish it also had an HDMI connection with ARC support, so again, you could use this with your television. I'm a home theater guy, so I'm always looking for ways that I can use something with my television, so I wish this had that. Now, one thing I should mention, you don't have to use a big honking AV receiver like the one I have here. They do sell a little small 2-channel amplifier that matches this. I think it's called the A50 Plus, and I'll put a link in the description below so you can check it out. But if you buy that, you'll have a nice little matching pair. And honestly, I had a good experience with this, with the exception of the setup. And that could have just been my own issues with my Wi-Fi network, but it was not intuitive. But otherwise, this is a great experience, especially once you just plug it in with a wire like I've done. It works great. So if you want to purchase this or anything else, use those links in the description below. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to give us a like, hit that subscription button, because I will be coming out with the review of these really soon. So definitely stay tuned. I'll talk to you next time.